Welcome back to the Modern Adolescent podcast. I'm so happy that you are here today and decided to join me. Today, I have a really interesting topic that I really want to talk about. So, when I originally started this podcast, it was my own idea and I really wanted to do it. But I also had the idea to approach my school and do it as a capstone project. So I'm getting credit for creating this podcast. And the due date for that is coming up soon. So this is going to be the last podcast for that project specifically. I'm pretty sure Modern Adolescence will continue after this. But before that project was finished, I really, really wanted to talk about mental health education and mental health awareness in high school. I feel like that's really what I'm trying to get at with Modern Adolescence is the modern high school experience. I think bringing that conversation to the next level is with regards to mental health education in high schools. That's really where teenagers get most of their information. They spend the majority of their time, in their high school, forming relationships, things like that. And I think creating an environment in high school and mental health education in high school is a very, very important issue. And I really wanted to touch upon it before the closing date for my project. So just talking in general, a child spends the majority of time in school from, elementary age all the way through high school and college and whatnot. But the majority of their social relationships and conversations that they're having, it's happening through their school and through their interactions with that. So it is crucial that when you're talking about mental health, that you include school in the same conversation, because that's really where children are getting the majority of their social skills and the majority of their information about the world is from education presented in school. And something that really, really surprised me from my research, and I got a couple different numbers based on different times, so I will correct myself either on this video or in the description if I got it wrong, but only 9 states in the U.S. require mental health education by law. So that means written down, there is a law that requires these states to educate about mental health. That's only 9. That's less than a fifth of states require mental health education. And then in the same regards, around 20 states and D.C. Include mental health and mental health education in their academic standards. So that's the public, from what I believe, the public school standards for education set by each state. That's about 20 and DC, which isn't even half of the country. Less than half of the country has any legislature, anything in their standards regarding mental health. And I think that's deeply, deeply disturbing, honestly. Depending on where you're born into and where you're getting your education, you're getting a different level of mental health education. And I think that's something crucial for students to learn. Every student is taught, math, English, science, all those subjects in basically every school in the country by law. But it's not required to have a health curriculum or a mental health curriculum, which is crucial, I would say, to your everyday function. I personally had to take 3 years of health in high school in order to graduate. I was taking health all throughout middle school, partially in elementary school, forming good habits, the thing that health is trying to teach. But I didn't really learn about the concept of mental health or mental illness or anything like that until it was brought up around middle school. And for students that don't get that kind of conversation and that kind of education, it's going to be tougher for them to rationalize the feelings that they're feeling and ask for help. And that's deeply worrying to me, the stats that there isn't, some sort of health, even in general, education requirement in all states. Going back also to the original survey that I posted, at the beginning of Modern Adolescence, I posted a survey kind of about teenagers and mental health, and I asked for actual responses kind of as a way for me to aim this podcast. And 75% of the people on the survey voted that they think their high school culture is not supportive. Now, I put it in a certain ranking, so my culture is mildly supportive, my culture is not supportive at all. Only 25% said my culture is 100% supportive of mental health. The rest of the 75% said it was below that mark, and that says a lot that students aren't really feeling supported by the culture in their schools. Also, only one person out of 50 said that the resources provided by their high schools were adequate enough. I also put this on a ranking as well. It was perfectly adequate, somewhat adequate, not adequate at all. That was kind of how the scale went. And only one person ranked it the top amount. And that I think does say a lot about just the culture and things like that. But also, barely anyone in that survey, I forget the exact number, put there's no resources at all. So I know personally in my high school, we are at least having the conversation about mental health. I think that there is a way to go in changing kind of the culture surrounding mental health, but we are having those conversations started in our health curriculum and in just talking in general that I think are pushing that way. I think there's still some work to be done, but they are kind of pushing that way. And in general, I can't really imagine what high school would have been like for me, not even knowing anything regarding my mental well-being or mental health. That's brought up in health class, kind of the even the definitions of anxiety and depression and things like that. If that wasn't brought up, I feel in my mind it wouldn't have been as rationalized or as normalized as I feel it should be. If I had never had a conversation about, depression or what are the symptoms of that or what that can do or how to reach out for help, I think in my mind, I would have thought what I'm feeling right now is not normal at all. I should keep going, stuff like that. And I wouldn't know how to ask for help. And I think mental health curriculum at its core probably should at least be allowing a student to rationalize what they're feeling and have the confidence to ask for help. So I don't want to keep blabbing away today because I had a very interesting interview that I want to get into with one of my school's health teachers, Miss Morin. We had a conversation kind of about this discrepancy in mental health education and how she approaches educating about mental health and mental well-being for teenagers. And I think it was a very, very nice conversation that we had. So I'm here with Miss Morin, who's a health teacher at my high school, and today we're going to be talking about kind of your approach to being a health teacher and mental health education in high school. So thank you so much for being on here today.
Well, thanks for having me.
No problem. So as a teacher, how do you approach educating on mental health?
So me personally, I don't have a unit on mental health because that is a full 9th grade unit in our state curriculum and our high school curriculum. But we do a lot in 11th grade about emotional health. So and we also do some things with mental illness, and it's important to distinguish between the two. But we do a lot with emotional health in 11th grade. During disease prevention units, especially the lifestyle unit, mental health totally ties in because everything we do to protect ourselves from lifestyle disease risk basically helps protect our emotional health. So we overlap on that quite a bit. But I try to approach these from a neuroscience perspective and make sure the kids understand that this is as much researched as any other kind of physical disease when we talk about mental illness, and that even happiness has so much research. Happiness and emotional health has so much research, and there's a lot of neuroscience to support the things that we teach about emotional health. So it's not just, your teacher said to do this. I try to really back it up with the science of there. And unfortunately, the thing that I think about with emotional health, it's so hard not to kind of get on a stump and keep talking about the smartphone.
Yeah.
it's the big white elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to hear it, but there's so much research about emotional health being harmed by using smartphones, and not just social media, but the actual just flipping back and forth and back and forth and back and forth is really stressful on our working memory. It's mentally exhausting. So we do actually have a unit on that in grade 11 when we watch The Social Dilemma.
Yeah.
I can't remember, did I have you in the spring or the fall?
You had me last year. It was in the spring, I believe.
So we did do that in the spring. It just came out last fall, so we didn't do that. But we added that piece. I think it's important for kids to understand what their smartphones are actually doing to erode their mental health.
Yeah. And
so we put that in there.
And definitely, like, one of the reasons I wanted to start this in general was, growing up as a teenager now, you didn't have, the smartphones and the technology that we have, so our experience is completely different, and I wanted to, start a dialogue kind of about the different experiences that we might have. So just in general, why did you want to become a health teacher?
So this is not a great answer because I never did want to become a health teacher. I fell backwards into this position. I worked at CDC right out of graduate school, so I worked at Centers for Disease Control. It was a really great job. I loved it, but we travel all over the country. And when I wanted to have a family, I really wanted to stay home with them. So that's what I did for a while. And I did some contracting for CDC. I was an expert witness a little bit. So I was doing some part-time things. And when the part-time stuff dried up, I looked around for more part-time work. My high school down the street needed a part-time biology teacher. And I thought, I can do that. And that was really naive and I did do it, but it was way harder than I thought it would. There's a lot that goes into becoming a teacher, and I had none of that training. So I did all of that. But then they didn't want the part-time teacher anymore. They cut 18 teachers that year.
Yeah.
So I looked around, and there was this great program in Shrewsbury, and it was full-time, and I was not sure. But I think it's because of the woman that was running the department then, and the fact that one of the main classes was disease prevention. I was like, this would be great for me. And it's turned out to be wonderful because it's still research all the time, only different than CDC research, but we still constantly have to learn new things and revise our curriculum. So it's still stimulating, and the kids keep it fresh.
Yeah.
I always learn something new from the kids.
Yeah.
So it turned out to be a really great fit. I just didn't really even know much about it before I fell into it.
Yeah.
So
that's great. So I've learned in my research that a lot of states, they don't even require any education on mental health and mental illness at all. Could you possibly speak on some of the requirements that Shrewsbury or Massachusetts has when you're producing your curriculum on mental health?
So yeah, it's so frustrating that health and PE are not required in so many places. It's just so frustrating because if learning about your body and taking care of your body isn't one of the most important things ever, I don't know what would be more important. And we do have, I printed it out because it's so old, but we have a Massachusetts Comprehensive Health Curriculum Framework. So our state has a comprehensive framework, and nationally there is a comprehensive framework too. So the topics that we cover are definitely outlined for us. And our state is revising this right now because it is a little bit outdated, but there is a whole section on social and emotional health and, mental health, including your own development as well as how you develop and interact in social circles. And they have very detailed lists of what should be covered in what grades. Unfortunately, our town doesn't have health in all grades, but we still try to cover all the bases, most of which covers emotional health, right? The healthy habits and what we can do to promote emotional health. And then also a section about understanding mental illnesses, awareness, recognition, getting treatment, things like that. So that it is outlined for us, and there's some flexibility at each level, whether it's elementary, middle, or high, what you do in what grades, but it still does need to be covered.
Yeah, definitely. And with this topic, do you believe that there's something that you either cover in the curriculum or isn't covered in a lot of curriculums that you think is really important to cover when talking about mental health or mental illness?
I believe our state does pretty well with this topic, but in general, generationally, there's a lot of stigma around mental health and mental illness. And this idea that you need to make time for meditation or you need to make time for sleep, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so important to get everybody in all the generations. My generation and my parents' generation aren't so open to this idea. And like you said before, you guys are growing up in a very different world. When I went to school, you went to sleep because there was nothing left to do. The TV was off. There was no cable. There was no smartphones. We weren't even on computers. So there was nothing left to do. So you actually got enough sleep. And we've just sort of engineered so many like regular things out of our life, even just working together, helping each other out. It's so easy to do everything on your own. As this past year taught us, we can all work from home and never interact again and get the job done. And that's not good for our health. It's just not. We need that social time. We need the quiet time. We need time in nature. We need sleep. And I think even though it seems like those are soft topics, we've got to make sure people are making time for that. So I think that's something that needs to be highlighted, not just not just mental illnesses, but that emotional health part.
Yeah, and I think definitely stressing like a healthy lifestyle and things like that is something that's so important that might not be talked about as much as just like the facts of just like what mental illnesses are and things like that. So my final question is kind of just a broad question. It's why is it important that we educate about mental health and mental illness in high schools?
I think a lot of that, I almost just answered some of that, it's that stigma of, especially in America or countries like ours, there's a lot of push towards success that seems to involve money or profit or gaining things. And that's not necessarily the best way to have good emotional health. Now, all of those things are great if you're able to do that along with the sleep and the, I don't know, whether it's meditation or exercise or have time to eat actual meals and eat with other people and socialize. So I think it's really important that we make it clear to kids that all of it matters. My students are overbooked, overstressed, overworked, and actually so are their parents, for many of them. And we have to actually give social time and sleep time and exercise time the same level of importance as we do to schoolwork and extracurricular or AP classes. It's just those should not take over the other important things. And then in terms of mental illness, I can't stress enough how important it is that we start talking about mental illness with the same tone, the same level, and same compassion that we might talk about diabetes or cancer or heart disease. Like nobody's shamed or blamed for having diabetes. And you say, oh, I have diabetes, I take insulin to manage it. We should be able to say, oh, I have depression and I take medication to manage it. And we should be able to say, I'm worried about you, I notice some signs, maybe you should look into talking to a doctor. We go take a physical exam every year, right? How often do we check in with a psychologist or psychiatrist just on a routine basis? I don't think anyone does.
No.
Right? Unless they've been referred. So it's just, and this is something that was new to me as a health teacher. I was much more in the molecular genetics world, and it's so important that we learn about it and talk about it normally and honestly and openly. No blame, no shame. We have to take care of ourselves, take care of our minds as well as our bodies.
Definitely agree. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. It means a lot to get your advice kind of as a teacher, as a health teacher, about mental health and mental illness education in schools. I think it's so important that students are educated about these topics. Really does make the difference. So extending my thank yous so much.
Well, thank you for doing this. I'm sure this is going to reach a lot of kids, and it's so important that students and young adults hear from each other. I think they listen more.
Yeah.
So it's great. So,
all right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Morin, for interviewing with me. It really means a lot. That's where I'm going to end the podcast today. I think a lot to be said about mental health education has been said. Thank you so much for listening to Modern Adolescence today. Make sure to check out the Modern Adolescence website. If you want to write for the website, make sure to respond to the questionnaire. Email me. I'll get that up on the website. Have a great day. Thank you so much for listening.